The courtroom was blanketed in a heavy silence, the kind that didn't bring peace but instead sat thick in the air, suffocating and oppressive. Every eye was locked forward, the weight of tension palpable as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Ethan Brooks sat at the defendant's table, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Despite the rapid drum of his pulse in his ears, his face remained an unmoving mask of calm. He had learned long ago that, as a black man in a courtroom, showing emotion could be dangerous. A single spark mistaken for aggression, a single glance misread as guilt. Across from him, Officer Ryan Callahan perched on the witness stand, his police uniform crisp, his badge gleaming beneath the courtroom lights. But his polished exterior was a hollow facade, covering a web of deceit unraveling with every word he spoke. "I saw the defendant flee the scene," Callahan stated firmly, his voice steady and unwavering. "He was aggressive, resisted arrest. We found stolen goods in his car." Lies. Every word of it. From behind Ethan, a soft, choked sob broke the stillness. His mother, Martha Brooks, struggling to hold it together. She had sat behind her son through every moment of this trial, her heart breaking with each lie that pushed him closer to a conviction. She knew Ethan wasn't perfect. No son was, but he wasn't a criminal. She had raised him right, taught him to be respectful, to keep his head down in a world that often saw him as a threat just for existing. Yet here they were, his freedom hanging by a thread, all because of one officer's twisted version of the truth. The prosecutor barely challenged Callahan's testimony, his questions rote and predictable. Another black defendant. Another rubber-stamped, guilty verdict waiting to happen. But Ethan's lawyer, Naomi Ellis, wasn't letting this go down without a fight. She rose gracefully from her seat, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached the witness stand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with a fierce, barely restrained fire. "Officer Callahan," Naomi began, her voice smooth but razor-sharp. "Are you certain of what you saw that night?" Callahan exhaled through his nose, a faint smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I wouldn't be under oath if I wasn't, ma'am." Ethan didn't flinch. He kept his gaze forward, jaw clenched tight, but inside, frustration burned. He had been home that night. He had proof. But the system wasn't built to believe men like him. It was built to trust men like Callahan. Naomi stepped closer, the tension in the room tightening with each click of her heels. "You stated that my client resisted arrest. Did your body camera capture this incident?" Callahan hesitated, a crack in the armor. "It was malfunctioning," he finally answered. A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Ethan shut his eyes for a second, the response as predictable as it was infuriating. Of course, the body cam had failed at the critical moment. But Naomi wasn't finished. "Well," she said, sliding a paper onto the evidence table, "it's fortunate you weren't the only officer on duty that night." Callahan's composure faltered for a beat, his jaw tightening. "We obtained footage from Officer Marcus Reynolds' body cam," Naomi continued, her voice growing sharper. "Funny thing is, camera worked just fine." The ripple of murmurs turned into a wave. Martha Brooks let out an audible gasp, clutching the arms of her seat. She had spent her life preparing her son for moments like this, preparing him to survive, but she had never dared hope for a moment where the truth might actually break through. Callahan stiffened, a thin layer of sweat breaking across his temple. "Would you like me to play the footage, Officer Callahan?" Naomi asked sweetly, but her words cut like knives. The room fell silent. Even the judge, who had until now been scribbling absent-minded notes, looked up, his interest piqued. "I don't see how that's necessary," Callahan began, but Naomi was already nodding at the technician. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as the grainy footage filled the screen. A quiet neighborhood, dimly lit by flickering street lamps. The date and time stamp matched the night of the arrest. Through the static came Callahan's unmistakable voice. "That's him. Black hoodie, hands in his pockets. Looks suspicious as hell." Ethan winced. He remembered that night. He'd been walking home from his friend's place, earbuds in, head down, thinking about a work project due the next day. Another officer's voice, Reynolds, came through the speakers. Ryan slowed down. The guy's just walking. But Callahan cut him off. They always act innocent. Watch this. A loud gasp echoed through the room. Even the judge's jaw clenched. On the screen, the footage showed Ethan completely unaware of the patrol car pulling up behind him. Then Callahan's voice again, sharp and aggressive. Hey, hands where I can see them. The Ethan in the footage turned, startled, his mouth opening to speak. But before he could say a word, Callahan grabbed him, shoving him hard against the patrol car. The sound of Ethan groaning in pain filled the courtroom. But the final nail was yet to drop. On the footage, Callahan leaned in close to Ethan's ear. The mic on Reynolds' vest picked it up perfectly. You move an inch, boy, and I'll make sure you don't walk away from this. The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Shouts. Someone cursed loudly from the back. Ethan's mother covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Callahan's face had gone ghostly pale. Naomi let the video play for a moment longer, showing the entire incident. Ethan passive, never resisting, nothing illegal in sight, before cutting the feed. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice slicing through the chaos. The prosecution's entire case is built on the testimony of an officer who not only lied under oath, but used threats and excessive force against an innocent man. She whirled back toward Callahan, whose hands now visibly trembled. Tell me, Officer Callahan, do you still stand by your statement? The room fell dead silent. All eyes on Callahan. The color drained from his face as he swallowed hard. I. Ethan could see the panic settling in, see the cracks splitting wide open. I lied, Callahan finally whispered. The courtroom erupted again. Martha sobbed openly now, this time tears of relief. Naomi barely blinked, as though she'd known this moment was inevitable. Speak up, Officer Callahan. Naomi pressed, her voice ice cold. Exactly what did you lie about? Callahan's shoulders sagged, defeated. All of it. The stolen goods, the resisting arrest. None of it happened. Judge Hammond slammed his gavel for order. Motion to dismiss all charges, Naomi demanded. Granted, the judge declared without hesitation. Ethan barely heard the chaos that followed. He felt his mother's arms wrap around him, felt the tension that had locked his body for months finally release. It was over. He was free. But as Naomi packed up her files, she shot him a look that said it wasn't over. Not really, because Callahan wasn't walking away from this either. And neither was the system that had let it happen.